Welcome back to BunkaiGaming, this is Matt. So as gaming has evolved, we've moved away from the more traditional of playing on one or two types of gaming systems. And it's now not unusual for gamers to play on multiple systems, whether it be a PC, Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo. We all now play across these multiple systems. But we hit a snag, especially when it comes to our gaming friends. They're spread across all these different systems, and it becomes increasingly difficult to play with them with similar games across these systems. Because what happens is, if we own, say, Battlefield 1 on Xbox, on PlayStation and on PC, we have to rank up the characters within those games multiple times. So if we want to get access to the same gear of, say, our primary account that we're using more regularly than the secondary accounts, we have to go through this whole process to get to the latest and greatest gear that we have on that primary account. Now, most times this takes a lot of time, and this can be made worse, especially when it's a game that has an RNG element in it. This can mean that it can take many weeks, if not months, to get the similar gear or weapons that we have on our primary account. And this is probably one of the most off-putting factors in games when you want to play with your friends, but you don't have the gear or the necessary perks to be able to play with them because you have to go through that rank up process. But now we're seeing that the majority of games have some kind of connection to the internet or always on, to allow the developers to see or have visibility about what we're doing within the game. This gives them the ability to record statistics and store character progression. It gives them more details about what weapons are being used, or if a particular group of people using a certain piece of gear set, or playing out a certain mission, and maybe even farming for particular things. It also gives them an easier route to be able to update the game on the fly. If they want to adjust the meta, if they find something that is overpowered, they can easily see this and are able to adjust the game to make it more balanced. So the question I have is, if the developers have access to all this information, I don't see why they can't create the backend system that is centralized so it records all our characters' progression. So that no matter which game or game system that we play on, we'll always be at the same level or progression that we were when we accessed it on some other system. That means we'll then have access to the same perks, gear, weapons, or whatever it was since we last played game. Of course, this can be complicated when content is time locked or set to some kind of exclusive deal. Now, to get around this, I think it's only a matter of locking that content out from the character until the exclusivity period is over. Once it expires, then the player should be able to gain access to it because they've already unlocked it. Again, some people do enjoy leveling up their characters multiple times. So this can be, again, easily fixed by having an option to, say, stop the recording of progression across multiple systems. That way, if they want to go through and want to rank up on the various different systems, they can do it. The other problem that we do encounter is what happens when you lose connection to the internet and your progression is not saved up to the cloud point. Now, they can just put systems in place or precautions in place that basically tell you when was your last save point. If you do not make sure that this was your official last save point, then you could potentially lose anything that you gained up to that or to that save point. It's pretty easy to be able to put these systems in place to protect the player and say to them, make sure you've got all your information saved up here, otherwise you lose stuff. But still, with all these technical challenges, I'm really surprised that some of the gaming developers have not attempted to try and implement a system like this. I think from their standpoint, this would definitely translate into more sales, as people would buy the same game across multiple systems. This would also give us as players some advantages, because if the population on one particular system dropped to a point where nobody was playing it and you couldn't find games, you could easily migrate yourself to a different system. and then you would have a larger player base to be able to play with. Of course, there's always downsides, and from the publisher's point of view, I think the DLC or the expansions and microtransactions is something that's going to probably cause them a bit of headaches, because at this point in time, if you want to buy an expansion or DLC or microtransaction, it has to be done per system. Now, I think they could change up the system or readjust it so that it can be working across all the various different systems. But I think from that perspective, you may see an increase in cost due to this. Allowing that to be accessed across multiple systems is a area of revenue they will actually lose out on, so they want to recoup that somehow. And we're starting to see the beginning of this, especially from the Microsoft side of things, or the Xbox side. Their buy once, play anywhere scenario is a really great thing from gamers. You can now buy a game on a particular system and be able to play it on the system of choice, whether it be an Xbox One or Windows 10 machine. This gives players a lot of flexibility because you can play on the system you really enjoy playing games on, instead of being confined to just one particular system. And this is one thing I think the gaming developers and also the publishers need to start addressing. The splitting of communities is causing us a lot of pain and a lot of frustrations, especially when a game we really enjoy, the population on that system drops off to a point where there is nobody playing the game. Being able to move between systems like I'm talking about gives a lot of flexibility in that regards. And we're also seeing the first instances of crossplay, as gamers from Xbox One and Windows 10 can play Gears of War 4, the various different modes, whether it's co-op, campaign, horde, and now they're starting to dive into multiplayer together. I think ultimately this is where the gaming world needs to move towards. We need to start to create this coexistence of the different systems. We need to find a way to be able to allow players from any system the ability to play together. Of course, there is going to be people who say that some systems should really never coexist, just due to some of the advantages. And I know this is the biggest argument still going around to this day, especially from the PC versus console. A lot of people say with the precision of a mouse and keyboard is a lot of difference to people who are playing on a controller. I don't believe that necessarily this day and age. I think the gap is a lot smaller, but there is people who say that it should not be allowed. But even to join the two console systems, if you could, PlayStation and say Nintendo and Xbox people were able to play in a central pool, it would definitely make things more interesting instead of being separate different systems. And I think overall, I think this is something that can be easily overcome. There is probably systems in place or ways to prevent one person dominating another. We see it so often in games as it is these days, that there's certain things they put in place to protect players from being basically stomped on or basically crushed into the ground by more experienced players. So I think that it is quite easy to allow them to create systems in place to protect them. But I still think that there needs to be a way to bring everybody together now and remove this separation that we're seeing. But the biggest issue that we face is to allow us to be able to interconnect and interplay with each other. I think that some kind of open system would have to be created to allow that. And I don't think a lot of the companies like Xbox and PlayStation and even Nintendo would allow that, because they'd be concerned about a lot of security regarding their systems. So I don't know whether a lot of what I've talked about would even be allowed to happen unless some kind of monumental change happened in the gaming world. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think this is a good idea? Do you think it's a bad idea? Do you think that this is something we will see happen in the next few years as gaming changes and evolves? Please let me know below what you think about it. And as always, I appreciate you taking the time to watch my video, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you. Bye.